Welcome everyone to this version of Poolside Proficiency. Every level builds toward AP. We're so pleased that you're joining with us for this segment of our Poolside Proficiency series as we explore how every world language teacher plays a vital role in building AP readiness from day one. We invite you to dive in with us as we discover how cultivating proficiency-based mindsets across all levels prepares students for long-term success. My name is Carolyn Taylor, and I'm joining you from Knoxville, Tennessee. And I'd like to take a moment to introduce my wonderful colleagues. All of us are veteran world language teachers who have taught across all levels in a wide variety of program types, including AP. Julie?
Hi, I'm Julie Pacheco-Toy, and I'm an instructional strategist at Wayside, and I taught Spanish for many years. I'm joining from my home in Oregon today. So glad you're here.
And I'm Amy Rill. I'm an instructional technologist here at Wayside. I taught German and Spanish, and I'm based in Maryland.
All right, thank you, ladies. Well, think about how you learned to swim. You started in the shallow end with an adult support, moved to the deep end, maybe even joined a swim team or tried scuba diving. No matter your proficiency, it's a skill achieved over time in small progressive increments with a coach guiding you. Most importantly, you were actually in the water, figuring it out, not just learning about swimming. Like mastering swimming, AP readiness develops gradually through practice and guidance over time. It begins in level one when our students are first getting their feet wet and getting comfortable in the water. Like becoming a scuba diver or a competitive swimmer, AP success depends on years of skill building, not just AP level resources or test prep during the AP course. Students need early and ongoing practice with authentic interpretation, spontaneous communication, writing, and cultural connections. Every world language teacher contributes to AP readiness across all levels. And we're going to do a short poll now. We'll start by asking you to share which languages you teach.
Like we have a good balance.
Yes.
A
At
lot
least
of
a
Spanish
good balance
teachers.
between French and Spanish.
Mhm. Typically what we see, right?
Yep, so there's our results where we are. I'm going to close the poll.
Okay, and now we're going to ask you to share with us which levels you teach.
And you should be able to choose if you teach multiple levels. You should be able to select all of those in there.
Good. So our level 3 teachers are leading. Yeah, and otherwise it's pretty consistent, right? Fairly even. Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. And so next we want to share with you our objectives for today. So essentially, we really want you to be able to think about this contribution from level one all the way up to AP in terms of preparing students for what they'll face on the AP exam. And as we learned from our poll, those of you joining us today might teach a variety of languages and levels in those various programs. Maybe some of you teach heritage learners, maybe some are in immersion. Some of you may teach international baccalaureate students. So, regardless of your background, your current situation, your previous experience, I'd like you just to think of how that is leveraged to really help prepare students for the AP experience. And as we work toward today's meeting, our objectives, I would really like you to think about together with your colleagues that concept that you are collectively building a student's language identity over time. And through cross culture or cross level collaboration, you create the vital continuity students need to steadily keep leveling up their language proficiency and enter into intercultural growth year after year. And now I'm going to pass the baton on to Julie, who will share some insights into the new AP exam requirements.
All right. There certainly has been a lot of buzz the last few months about the revised World Languages course and exam for school year 2026-27, and with good reason. Although the changes in the exam is not the focus of our webinar today, we wanted to do a quick overview of the course and exam as a foundation for talking about how every world language teacher and every world language classroom are key to building AP skills. So let's take a look. All right. At the core of the AP World Language and Culture courses are skills, identifying what students should know and be able to do to succeed in the course and on the exam. Students develop and apply these skills over the span of their language learning experience. The College Board resources combine presentational and interpersonal communication into one broad skill category starting this next school year. But for today, we have split them out here in order to break down how those skills will be assessed on the exam. So first, presentational speaking and writing skills are assessed on the updated exam through the presentation of the course project, a 3-minute presentation of a research project that students will have been working on in the months leading up to the exam, and through the argumentative essay. Interpersonal communication is going to be assessed on the updated exam through the project Q&A, in which students will respond to 4 questions about their project. Interpretive communication is going to be assessed on the exam through the multiple choice section, in which students read and listen to authentic resources and respond to interpretive questions. And finally, cultural understanding is assessed primarily through the course project and the argumentative essay, but really it's woven throughout the whole course and the exam through the investigation of cultural products, practices, and perspectives, and through development of intercultural proficiency. We'd like you to take a moment to share anything that stands out to you or surprises you about the AP Language and Culture exam, especially if you didn't know much about it before tonight. Go ahead and let us know in the Q&A. We will be able to see your responses, but other participants will not. So we're going to share some of your responses from the Q&A. And let's see, Amy, I'm not sure I can, oh, there we go. I can see the Q&A.
They're popping in. They needed some time to think.
Yes. Mm. Yes, this looks like a proficiency-focused classroom. It sure does. And there have been some people noticing that there's no more email on the test. After this little Q&A session, we're going to take a closer look at the actual changes from the previous exam to this one. And that is one of those changes, yes. And that is a good question. I wonder what type of questions are students required to answer for the project Q&A? I do too. From my understanding, it will be questions. So there'll be pre-recorded questions, like an interlocutor that's been pre-recorded, just like in the past, except that the questions will be related to the project. As such, they'll be fairly general because they will have to be relevant to the projects of all students. Let's see, the interpersonal is about the project. I'm surprised by how much emphasis is placed on speaking and cultural understanding, not just reading and writing. It really measures whether students can use Spanish in real life situations. Absolutely. That is the intention. So I'm glad you noticed that. Listening and speaking, is it the same as the conversation? The only listening and speaking, the interpersonal speaking section will be the project Q&A, and the format will be very similar to the simulated conversation previously, but it will be questions about the project. There are a few people who are concerned about the project and have questions about the project. One about AI, another thing that's on everyone's mind these days. Let's see, I know they do it in chunks, but theoretically, what if they used AI to do it and it's not what they're turning in during class? Excellent question. Good. Great. One more short chance to add any of your noticings. Anything that surprises you or stands out? Ah, yes. What are the parameters for the project? Does College Board assign a topic? Yes, and we're going to take a look at that on the next slide. So I think that is a good question to move on to the next slide with. Thank you for all of your great questions. Okay, so now that you know a little bit about the skills assessed by the AP exam, let's take a quick look at the changes to the course and to the exam. And these revisions impact the French, German, Italian, Spanish, Chinese, and Japanese language and culture courses and exams for the upcoming school year. So first, it's not on the slide, but let's just talk very briefly about the changes to the overall course as opposed to the exam. So there have been minor changes to the themes and contexts. The course skills have been streamlined to focus on those 3 skill categories we were just talking about. And then the course project, which is the presentation of it, is an element of the free response section of the exam. The course project includes tasks to complete throughout the school year. And starting in January, teachers and students will be able to access the topic and source materials that will be used to prepare for the exam. The theme, thank you. The theme has already been announced, but we don't know the contexts and the specific prompts yet. So the theme for this upcoming year's exam will be the arts theme. All right, and Amy put a link in the chat for you where you can learn more about the changes to the course, since we're just doing a very quick overview today. And now let's look at the changes to the exam. So perhaps the biggest change to come out of the revisions is the addition of the course project to both the course and the exam. This also means that portions of the previous exam will be removed next year, as some of you noticed. The way that the exam is administered will change. Students will all use the Blue Book digital testing application to complete all sections of the exam. The exam will start with the free response section. That's a change also. So that includes the project presentation, the project Q&A, and the argumentative essay. The multiple choice section of the exam is shorter than in the past with a few less questions. And the scoring will adjust to allow for the course project component and the pieces that have been removed and will become more analytical. So the only part that truly was removed is the email reply, and the simulated conversation has been replaced with the project Q&A. All right, so now that you have some information, let's see. Now that you have a basic awareness of the skills that AP students will be assessed on and how they will be evaluated, let's do a little backward design thinking on how all teachers, including novice level teachers, can help students begin building those skills. Here are 4 key practices that you can focus on beginning on day 1 of level 1. First, it's important for all teachers of world languages to center proficiency-based communicative language teaching. This means that our priority and our focus should be communication. Culture can and should be embedded in everything we do, and we should be explicitly teaching intercultural skills. And this can be a challenging one, but we're going to be helping you out with it during this session. Start using authentic resources from the very beginning. Take another look at those 4 recommendations and ask yourself if you are already doing some of these things. I bet you are. Next, Carolyn's going to take you on a deep dive into what each of those skills that we were talking about look like in the courses that lead up to AP.
Thank you, Julie. So in this next segment, we're going to focus on how students' language skills progress as they move through course levels 1, 2, and 3 across the proficiency benchmarks. So on that next slide, I want you to focus on the domains. So we've got next to the level, we're going to be looking at the AP focus themes. So the interpretive mode of communication, followed by interpersonal and presentation, and then the anchor of cultural understanding that runs through everything. So as we're focusing on these progressions across levels, keep in mind that we're focused on what students can do with the language at each stage. One of the participants had talked about, students being able to, use the language so much more, prominently now. And that's the exact intention, to be sure that students not only are coming from a place of accuracy and fluency, but that they're also able to really express themselves on a variety of situations involving real language, real life application. So if we look first at the interpretive communication, so when you kind of size up where they begin to where they would end in year 3, we'll notice that the students' reading and listening skills progress from just finding basic details to comparing sources and then analyzing complex texts. So you can see how that, ramps up in complexity, depth, difficulty throughout those years. And then in the middle column, interpersonal and presentational communication, here learners will advance from communicating basic ideas to then defending their opinions and then coordinating plans using structured paragraphs. And then with cultural understanding, right, the glue that binds everything together, learners move from identifying basic cultural elements to comparing cultures and connecting diverse perspectives. All right, next we have a resource that we wanted to share with you. This is meant to give you a little bit of context. So, this is a commercial advertising the FIFA World Cup, and it emphasizes the matches that now have been hosted in Mexico. So, Amy's going to play the video for us, and she's also going to put the link to access the video if you're interested in using it.
Somos anfitriones del mundo por tercera vez. Y de nuevo, queremos decirles bienvenidos a México. Tierra de verdes paisajes, mareas maravillosas y ríos de colores. De increíbles bailes, de música y obras de arte. El lugar para sorprenderte con plazas, templos y arquitectura. Un lugar lleno de vida nocturna. De tradiciones, de gente extraordinaria. Este mundial demostraremos al mundo lo que somos. Somos pasión. Somos fútbol. Somos historia. Somos 3 veces anfitriones. ¡Bienvenidos a México! Somos México. Selección Nacional de México.
Okay, so so much to dig into with that resource. I just love that. And so, using the video, the ad that we just saw, here are a few ideas that I wanted to share with you for engaging our year one students from the novice low to high levels. So, with the interpretive mode, students would recognize keywords and phrases, right? They may have caught football, goal, names of host cities like Miami or Mexico City. Maybe they caught some of the dates or even simple action verbs. There were quite a few cognates that they could pull from, right? And then just having the visual accompanying the speech, it really helps students to latch on to quite a bit of the content. So then for the interpersonal and presentational, again, this is where students would share that basic information. So maybe they pulled out that the matches are in June and July. They might say, well, oh, I see a stadium, or maybe soccer is really fast paced. And then moving into cultural understanding, here students would know or recognize some cultural products and practices. So they might be able to identify some of the team jerseys, the flags, maybe even specific stadium landmarks, or they may have been impressed by the passionate way that fans celebrate goals. All right, next we're going to look at year two, right? So where students are coming from the novice high to the intermediate low range. And in this context, you're going to see a podcast and an article, both on the same topic of the World Cup relative to Mexico. And so remember that within the context of the argumentative essay portion of the AP exam, students are now going to make comparisons among 3 different authentic resources. So in the example that we've shared here, you could create an essay prompt using that previous video we just saw, along with episode 321 that you see here, that comes from the Learn Spanish and Go podcast. It's a wonderful podcast if you haven't listened to it before. And then the news article that we see on the right pictured by Jesus Garcia Cruz, they both relate information about the FIFA World Cup games in Mexico and touch on a lot of different topics. So Amy will put in the chat for us links to both of those resources so that you have them as well. All right, so still drawing upon our three resources, we're going to now look at the novice high to intermediate low again. So let's think about the interpretive mode. So as students potentially are pulling from any of these three resources, you would want them to identify supporting details. So maybe they're keying into specific statistics that may have been mentioned in the article or the podcast or even commercial, maybe the schedule of games, ticket information, or maybe even exact quotes from interviewed fans or players. And so then taking that into the communicative piece, so the interpersonal and presentational mode, they might express preferences and support opinions, maybe by discussing which host city they prefer to visit for a match or which team they really want to win. And they would provide straightforward reasons like, I'd like to go to Mexico City because the stadium is beautiful and I like the weather there. And then leading to cultural understanding, the learners might compare cultural products and practices with their own culture by examining how soccer culture and fan enthusiasm displayed in the target country's commercial differ from or even align with sports culture in their own communities. All right, and then on the next slide, we're going to see essentially, we're looking at how we're scaffolding the performance of students, really keying into those benchmarks of progress, of proficiency along the way, right? And so now that we've mapped out a bit the performance at the novice and intermediate levels, I think the big question is, how do we get our students there and what tools can we use to help our students? So here are three quick ways that I'd like you to think about scaffolding. So criteria dictate strategy, right? So everything that we're focusing on are those end learning goals. So our goal determines our game plan. Before we design any task, we look at the proficiency target first and let that guide every single classroom decision. And secondly, form follows function, right? So think of it like training wheels. We provide temporary support students need to safely try out higher level language until they can pedal on their own. And then finally, intentional design. We want students working with real world authentic resources from day one. By building consistent routines, we make complex tasks feel completely doable. And we can't just hand a novice learner an authentic resource and expect them to suddenly analyze a cultural perspective, right? We've got to build that bridge for our students. So think of these next 5 strategies that we're going to share as construction tools. And as we review each one, I invite you to ask yourself, which specific communicative mode or proficiency tier does this unlock? So let's dive into our first tool, inside-outside circles. All right. So outside circles actively involve students with multiple partners to discuss a topic. So you would divide the class into an inner circle facing outward and then an outer circle facing inward. So that way each student has a partner. And then you would introduce a prompt for, let's say, a 1-minute conversation. And then afterward, you would have either one or both of the circles rotate one space to face a new partner, and repeat. So if you wouldn't mind, put in the chat which mode of communication does this target. So when students are doing inside-outside circles, what mode of communication is our goal?
And I launched it in a poll for you, Carolyn.
Oh, thank you so much. Perfect. Okay, that's right. So interpersonal speaking and writing. Yep, the vast majority answered that correctly. All right, so now let's move on to another one. So as I'm describing this activity, I'd like you to tell us what mode you think this engages students in. So I think I see, I wonder. So this activates interest and cultural inference, right? So the teacher shares an image, audio, video, maybe a short text. And first, students jot down objective observations, so what stands out to them. And then second, they analyze what they think about it, and then what it reveals about the target culture. And finally, they generate a follow-up question or more to discuss in groups or as a whole class. All right, so we'll see what you come up with for the I see, I think, I wonder. All right, looking great. Yep, so it is the interpretive reading and listening coupled with the cultural understanding. Perfect. All right, let's move on to chat mats. So which mode of communication are we drawing upon for our students with chat mats? So they are like desk level anchor charts, and they provide useful expressions, maybe sentence starters or frames. And depending on the level and purpose, they could even stay the same all year round. So some might contain rejoinders to keep a conversation going. You could even change them out each unit as you scaffold to help support students' communication. All right, I see the results coming in. Right, and so depending how they're used, essentially, interpersonal speaking, and it could be, it could be interpretive listening too. All right, let's move on to surveys. So surveys and questionnaires, what mode do they support? So students would circulate around the room with a list of questions to interview their classmates and gather their answers. And students can survey a small group or the whole class, and then they tally and share the results. And for an extension, they could compare their findings to real world data from the target culture. So what do you have to say about that? Which mode or modes? Okay. So interpersonal speaking and listening, right? And then jotting that down and recording it. So writing as well. And then if you add that extension, right, it would certainly include cultural understanding. And then even presentational speaking and writing, if they were to report back on those target culture findings. All right, looking good, everybody. All right, we're going to do one more, and this is the anticipation guide. All right, so anticipation guides are all about sparking curiosity and tapping into what students already know before they dive into a text or a video. So by having them agree or disagree with just a few quick statements beforehand, we give them instant context and a clear purpose for reading or watching. All right. So what mode and skill or skills do you think? All right. So it is interpretive listening and reading. And I hope that giving you a chance to really think about these activities will help you more intentionally choose them based on where your students are in that learning progression and whether they need help to understand, if they need more comprehensible input, or if they're at the point where they're ready to start using that maybe new grammar, new vocabulary, new cultural content. All right. Thank you so much. And now you're in for a treat. Amy's going to share some insights and resources from her years teaching German and Spanish across levels.
Thanks, Carolyn. As a German teacher, I was fortunate to teach students from the start of their language learning journey all the way through AP. My upper level classes were combined, so years ago I decided to teach the same content from the 6 AP themes, rotating those sub-themes every other year. That means that everyone got AP level resources, but it didn't mean that I expected every student to show what they knew in the same way. Differentiated activities, supports, skill builders, and lots of low stakes practice help them feel confident interpreting and producing language. That approach trickled down into my level 1 and 2 classes and even into my Spanish 1 class, which is a language I would never be able to teach at the AP level. But just like in my German classes, the skills we practice daily in Spanish 1 would eventually help students listen, read, write, and speak confidently in their upper level classes. I could help them worry less about structure and more about focusing on the language, no matter whose class they moved into next. If I had to pick one thing that transformed my teaching, it was incorporating authentic resources into my lessons every day. An authentic resource is something created by someone from the target culture for others in that community. When students interact with authentic resources, they see the language the way that it's really used. And these authentic texts, audio, and images are exactly what shows up on the AP exam. The resources Carolyn featured earlier were authentic, created by native speakers for native speakers, just like the ones that I'm showing you here that come from our Basel series, Entre Culturas, Entre Culture, and Interculturel. Authentic resources are a great jumping off point for writing activities or conversations, whether students are speaking as a whole class, in groups, or in pairs. They also spark investigation into the products, practices, and perspectives of the target culture, the same kind of investigating students will do researching their AP project topic. I have often reused the same authentic resources like songs, infographics, social media posts, memes, and commercials across multiple levels. Sometimes students remembered and sometimes they didn't. Either way, we did something different with it each time. If reusing a resource feels like you're cheating, think about how often you've heard the same song or seen the same ad break in your favorite show or noticed the same signs on your commute. Each time, you probably catch something new. It's the same for our students. When students look at a resource like this, will they understand every word? No, and that's okay. They don't need every word to make meaning. With guidance, they'll build confidence spotting words and phrases, and eventually move on to describing main ideas, comparing cultures, and speaking or writing about what they found. Here are 5 reminders to give students before they dive in. Start small. Look for cognates, numbers, and repeated words. Here, students don't need to know loisir or keep it. Sorry, that was the French. I'm definitely a German speaker. Je ne parle pas français. To notice. Désolé. So I don't need to know that word to notice that it keeps showing up, and the percentages and times kind of jump right out at you too. Use the visuals, the icons, images, and layout. A computer, a TV, or a soccer ball tell half the story before anyone even reads a word. Have students check out the title if there is one. Often, the main idea is right there for you. At first, students need guidance with the basics: who, where, what, when. Those offer them choices in the target language. Is this about kids or adults? Are we talking about sports or food? Does this feature information about France or Canada? This, paired with gestures, helps to build the habit early. Describing the audience and purpose, why and for whom, takes longer to master, but with practice, students build the skill to answer automatically. As Carolyn mentioned, we're building a bridge using a variety of tools and strategies to develop skills for analyzing cultural perspectives. The easiest way that I found to build these skills daily was to include an authentic resource in my bell ringer or warm-up, tie it to a unit theme, maybe a current event, or even a date of significance. I'm going to ask you now to grab a piece of paper, and then I would like for you to recreate this chart or something like it in your own words. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. And then I'm going to share some of my favorite ways to practice communicative skills for AP readiness. Some of you may already use some of the strategies I'm going to suggest. Some you may have used before and you want to bring them back into your instruction. Maybe you'll hear something new that you want to try, or maybe something that's not for you, but maybe you know that it's perfect for the teacher down the hall. So I'll give you just a moment to grab something, create a quick little chart, and then we will be talking about this a little bit later. Before speaking or writing about a topic, students first need to recognize and interpret while gradually building skills with practice towards synthesizing and inferring meaning from resources. Students look at a chart, infographic, or text and highlight, circle, or list what they understand. As you've probably guessed from the list that you're making right now, I love a good organizer. Teaching students when to use a T-chart, Y-chart, Venn diagram, a mind map, or an idea web helps them organize what they see and hear so that they can talk or write about it later. Since interpreting and comparing sources shows up in the multiple choice section of the exam, I introduced those MCQ style questions in the target language starting in level 1. What is the purpose? What is the text about? Who is it written for? And according to the text, ... As levels progress, add comparison questions. Like Carolyn showed earlier, share two sources and then ask, what do these two things have in common? How are they different? Many of the same activities for interpreting print sources can also be used for interpreting audio and video too. One strategy from our polls was the anticipation guide. For novice low to mid learners, the anticipation guide can be a list prepared in advance by the teacher for students to circle or check off what they expect to see or hear based on the title. Novice high to intermediate learners can create their own list. This same list can then be used while listening or viewing. While listening, students can draw what they hear, sorting items into categories, sketching a scene, or even making a comic strip. For events described in sequence, students can put things in order using word lists, pictures, or quotes. This does take some advanced prep, a numbered list or a set of pictures to move around, but once those are made, you can reuse them. If your students use picture flashcards, try telling a story with the pictured word and have them move the cards into order. This works well for school schedules, recipes, process for recycling items, or vacation plans too. After listening, reading, or watching, I like to give students time to process in writing before they speak. Writing doesn't have to be long, time-consuming, or graded. Students will need to write that argumentative essay on the AP exam, sharing ideas, information, and opinions on familiar and research topics in an organized way. Interpreting the resource and organizing their thoughts is the first step. Showing understanding and expressing an opinion about it comes next. Novice students could write a description with hashtag in the target language, highlighting the main topics. Intermediate students could add detail and compare cultures. Ask students what title they'd give the video, graphic, or artwork, or what headline maybe could work better than the one that's there, and have them defend their choice. Scaffold with sentence starters for novice learners, and move toward conjunctions and transitions for higher levels. This is one of my favorite ways to open class or kick off a new unit. Turning ideas from an authentic resource into poetry is another creative way to show understanding. Novice learners can write diamond or acrostic poems with simple words and phrases. Advanced learners can use more complex structures and could even turn the poetry into song lyrics. After an interpersonal activity like a survey, students can turn their data into a graph or infographic with a title and labels. Upper-level students can add a longer write-up focused on comparisons. Students could also look at a vacation, restaurant, or event website from the target culture and write a short review giving their opinion. Presentational writing and speaking usually go hand in hand, and you can choose to do them either before or after interpersonal speaking. For example, students read an infographic about transportation and then turn to a partner to share the facts they understood, anywhere from single words to full complex sentences depending on the level. I use turn and talk a lot because it gives everyone speaking time in a low stakes setting. For students who'd rather that you are the only one who hears them speak, or as an exit ticket after a class discussion, have them record a voice memo and share it with you. Students can also expand on the hashtag or online review, turning into a short Instagram or TikTok reel with explanations, opinions, and comparisons. Presentational speaking is often easier for our students because they just have to talk. Interpersonal speaking, however, requires that students listen to what others say and ask and then respond. It feels unpredictable because you never really know what the other person is going to say. That's why daily practice for interpersonal communication is essential. The best way we can get students comfortable with how to ask and answer questions is by modeling using teacher to student and student to student Q&A. Personalized questions and answers, or PQA, is a strategy in which you ask your students questions about themselves related to the words and ideas featured in the resource. Once students hear the teacher asking questions, I may follow up with a question chain where one student asks the question, another responds, and then becomes the asker of the next question. These questions could be listed on the board or screen or printed on a set of cards. These written questions could also be used for a turn and talk or as a Q&A. And if you want to get students up and moving, in a mingle activity like inside-outside circles, quiz trade, or my favorite, musical conversations, during which you play music while the students walk until the music stops, and then they chat with the person closest to them. Let's take this infographic about the favorite board games in Germany. After interpreting the resource using one of the interpretive print strategies, students could survey each other to see which board games are their favorite. As I mentioned earlier, they could use the results to create a graph to go along with it and then compare their graph to the original infographic. Finally, students ask for and give advice related to the information presented in or about the main topic of a resource. Phew, that was a lot. So take a moment now and look at your list. So you just did an interpretive listening and presentational writing activity. So yes, it was in English, and you most likely had no problem understanding what I was saying, but this is an example of what you might do with that input and what to do with that output. So if you use this kind of graphic organizer with your students, what might you do next with the information? So I'm going to ask you to put that in the chat. What are some ideas of how you would follow up an activity using a graphic organizer? Oh, sorry, not in the chat, in the Q&A. My apologies. so turn and talk might come after this. Compare the lists and use them to make choices or comparisons. So the audience would be, ask what, who is the audience? And then give an opinion or give some advice. So those are all great strategies for following up. So with the input is coming in, the output, the student is writing down, and then doing something with it, having a conversation or talking about it. So whenever possible, I tried to build all three modes into every lesson. And what that looked like changed depending on the level, the class length, or where I was in the unit, and what my students needed. We want students to stop worrying about what to do and how to do it. Giving them the same structured ways to organize their ideas, build skills that they can use later on their own, no matter the topic. Word walls, chat mats, table tents, conversation cards, and personal dictionaries help students keep producing and interacting in the target language. As they get more confident, they naturally rely on the supports less. That's the goal, moving from memorized phrases in one situation to using what they know to create in any situation. I reuse the same graphic organizers, speaking prompts, and supplies across every level. Things like pinch cards, table tents, and skill builders I copy on different colored paper by language or level, then laminate for reuse. My colleagues and I also swapped sets of conversation cards for quiz trade or inside-outside circles, and I'd reuse the same images and slide formats for a given prompt. And finally, have fun. We world language teachers are so lucky. Our curriculum covers so many everyday topics that there's always room for authentic materials like music, social media trends, and games that are relevant to your students' lives. Ask them what they like and how they want to communicate about it. They will enjoy using the language, and you will enjoy watching them grow. I'm going to pass it off to Julie to finish us up tonight.
So many good ideas, Amy. We have shared a lot today about how even level 1 classes can begin preparing students for the skills to develop the skills that will lead to success in AP levels. We're going to send out a recording of the webinar so that you can watch it again. And we've also put together a choice board with a few more strategies and tools to inspire you. You can scan the code on your screen or grab it from the link in the chat. And if you use a Wayside textbook, you should also check out the Instructional Strategies Toolkit under the Learning Tools menu for more ideas on building these communication and AP readiness skills. And we would love it if you would share your, yes, don't let perfect be the enemy of good.
Mhm.
Also, I've been learning lately from our fearless leader, Michelle Ola, don't let perfect be the enemy of done also.
Mhm.
So we would love it if you would share your biggest takeaways from today's webinar by completing one or more of these sentence prompts in the Q&A. And after you do that, don't leave yet because we have a few more important things to share with you. So complete one or more of these sentence prompts. I used to think, and now I think. Or one new thing I want to try next school year is, or I want to learn more about, I want to learn more about the AP project and how to build towards it. So there are two podcasts, well, one previous webinar and also a podcast on that topic on our website, and also our final session of the of Poolside Proficiency will address that. Inner outer circles. I love this. I used to think getting students to talk in the target language was impossible. Whoops. And now I think it's easier because I have tried the chat mats. That's fantastic. Okay, I would love to read all of these to you, but it looks like we've got 4 minutes left and we have a few more things to share with you. So we are going to move on to those. The first one is that we would really love to have your feedback on this professional learning experience. So if you wouldn't mind either using the QR code or the link that Amy's putting in the chat, we would love for you to give us your feedback. We'll let that sit there for a moment. All right. And to request a certificate of participation in today's webinar, you can scan this code or select the link in the chat. And then after filling out the form, a completed certificate will be sent to the email provided. And if you don't receive it within 24 hours, check your junk or spam folder. It could be there. All right. Did you know that Wayside has just published the first and so far the only new textbook that is fully designed for and aligned with the revised AP Spanish Language Culture course and exam? You can scan this code or visit the link in the chat if you'd like to request a sample and learn more. It's called Apunta al Futuro. And the last QR code our AP titles for French and German are Apprenant and Neue Blickwinkel. And some of the examples shown throughout this webinar came from our Basel series that lead up to those two AP books, Entre Culturas, Entre Culture, and Interculturel. If you would like to know more about how Wayside's textbooks and resources support students on their journey to communicative and AP success, you can scan this QR code or select the link in the chat. Our professional learning team members are all seasoned world language educators with experience either teaching AP courses or supporting their colleagues in teaching the skills students need for success on the AP exam. Feel free to reach out to any of us anytime. And Amy put that link in the chat as well. And finally, our final event of this year's Poolside Proficiency Summer Professional Learning Series is coming up in August. I'll be heading to the AP Annual Conference next week. And when I come back, we'll be preparing a podcast sharing all kinds of helpful information gleaned from that experience. You can go to the link in the chat to sign up to receive a notification and be the first to know when that podcast has dropped. Thank you so much for joining us today. See you around the pool.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.